All right, so next section is on economic transformation. So, as I've said, industrialization had social, political, and economic effects on Western Europe and the world. Our expectations are to explain how Britain's economic system transitioned from a home-based industry to factory-based industry during the Industrial Revolution, and then to describe the growth of population, rural to urban migration, and the growth of cities associated with the Industrial Revolution. So our key terms for this section are cottage industry, domestic system, the factory system, mass production, interchangeable parts, the enclosure, capitalism, monopoly. So industrialization in Britain it takes decades, but once it's complete, it's completely transformed the economy of Great Britain. So it's changed the way that people are working. People are now leaving to go to work. They're not like going out to the field to work. They're leaving their home, which is generally an apartment, um, and then they're going to a factory. It changes the way that people grow crops. You're going to have machines that do things like reap. You'll have mechanized planters, things like that. And it also changes the diet. You'll see there'll be an increase in crops like corn and things like that, potatoes. There are new financial structures that are developed and also new business structures that are developed as a result of industrialization's growth. So the early domestic system was the cottage industry, and this predates the Industrial Revolution. And this is where people would do craft work from home. So as you can see in this image here, you've got people. There's this person spinning the cloth. I'm not really. I think she's making the yarn. She's taking multiple threads of this, and then this person is weaving it into something, some fabric. So people did it from their homes, and this is generally what homes would have looked like at the time. Because it's done from their home, that's why it's called a cottage industry. These people are skilled artisans, though. It takes a lot of skill to be able to weave, to be a weaver. So the person owns their tools, pots, the glasswork, the furniture, everything. Okay, these are all examples of skilled artisans, tool makers, potters, glassware, furniture. Sorry, clothing. And all of these things were sold locally, so it wouldn't have been sold like built in Birmingham and then sold in the United States. If it was built in Birmingham, it would be sold in Birmingham. I've shown you this domestic system before, back when we talked. I don't even remember what it was. Actually, it was something to do with France, I believe. So the cottage industry leads to the domestic system, and this is again still pre-industrial, and it's a manufacturing that's done by workers. So like a merchant, somebody goes and they buy the raw material. They then take that raw material to the various cottages. Those cottages will then turn that into a finished product, which the merchant buys from the cottage industry people. Okay. So how the domestic system is different from the cottage system is that the goods that are made in the domestic system are for domestic consumption under the in same thing for the cottage industry, where goods for the industrial revolution, these are going to be sold on the international markets. Farming was the main job that people did in the day, but in the evening they could do factory work from their home or during off seasons. Once you put your crops into the ground, you don't really have a whole lot to do from that point on. You need to sharpen the plow, take care of the cattle, things like that. But for the most part, you have downtime and you can use that to work. And then this provides cheap labor for growing markets. So the domestic system, they produce a lot of cloth, wool cloth specifically. So merchants would go to farmers, they would buy the sheared wool from the sheep, then they would deliver that wool to different families in the country, telling them like, what do you want to turn it into? What do you want it to be? What color do you want it to be dyed? So the family members, they would then cart the wool, they would spin it into thread on a spinning wheel or a spinning jenny. The merchant would then come back, would pick up that thread, and then they would deliver it to another family's workshop. That family member would weave it into cloth on a hand loom, and then it would be dyed, and then that would be its finished product. And then from there, the merchant would then come back and pay the family, and then take the cloth to the market. The factory system, though, will supersede the domestic system. So the factory system is it's an industrial system of manufacturing in which workers, the raw material, and the machinery are all gathered under the same roof. And the merchants, they could better meet rising demand for fabric by gathering workers into one centralized location. And these merchants, they provided spinning wheels and all of the equipment needed. And because they were doing that, that meant that they could pay less to the workers because they owned the means of production. Now, eventually, other industries will follow the same method. So this begins with the textile industry, but this will move into all aspects of industry. So there's some advantages to this system. The first is that the merchants and the entrepreneurs, they can directly supervise from the offices above, and they can take advantage of innovations in equipment. You could replace the water spinning jenny that you have with a coal-powered one. You could use sources of energy other than water that become available, and then you can make it the transition from muscle, meaning people, to machines. And then any new development in how to organize things you can apply. So it says it's all under one roof, right? But it's also on multiple floors, and they will begin to realize that you can organize the floors to do specific jobs, just like they had specific houses that did certain things with, like the say with the wool. They did the same thing with these different floors, and by the time you got to the ground floor, that's where the finished product was completed and ready to be shipped out. So you had semi-skilled workers that could specialize into just doing one task that needed to be done to make the product. So you could be a spinner, you could be a dyer, depends. So each worker did one task, and they did that same task all day long. And then because you were specialized, you could do it more quickly. And this was possible because they used what are called interchangeable parts. And these are parts that can be used, like they can be swapped out because they're identical. And this leads to mass production, which is high volume, low cost manufacture of identical items through the use of specialization and interchangeable parts. So the factory system leads to interchangeable parts, which leads to mass production. And then eventually, this will lead to the assembly line. So this gets us to Henry Ford. So this was the next step to speed up the manufacturing process. So they had conveyor belts that would carry the product from person to person. Then each person would have to add whatever particular part they did. So maybe you put the wheels on, and then the next person put the lug nuts on, if it was for automobiles. Henry Ford is the first person to use this innovation in large-scale manufacturing. And these changes in the manufacturing process, they increase efficiency and they increase productivity, which means that they lower the cost to produce a good. And the lower the price the goods were, the more affordable they were to people. And this begins a demand economy in which people buy products that they actually make. So complete the statement below from the perspective of each of the people that are listed below. So I feel blank about the Industrial Revolution because blank. So if you're a factory owner, how would you feel about the Industrial Revolution? What about if you were a factory worker? And then what about if you were a consumer? So just take this on. Factory owner, they own the means of production. The factory worker, they work the means of production. The consumer, they buy whatever is produced. All right, the power of steam. So the steam power helps drive the Industrial Revolution, and its impact was evident in factories and on the farm. So no innovation was more crucial to the Industrial Revolution than the steam engine. Steam power transformed both farm production and the transportation system. Steam powered locomotives could deliver raw material to factories and finished goods to markets faster than ever before. And then farming had always been labor intensive, but now farmers were able to haul the portable steam engines to the fields to power their tools. And another step forward came in 1842 when a British company developed a self-propelled steam engine that could pull a plow, so it's a tractor. And it paved the way for tractors and other machinery. So farm efficiency shot up dramatically. So this begins in about 1842. So we also have a revolution in agriculture. So the mechanization that took place in industry also helped transform agriculture. So this is Cyrus McCormick, and he invented what's called the mechanical reaper. And what it does is it cuts down So that's what this is, the blade. And then it collects the grain. So this thing spins the cut, and then you just bundle it up right here. So other machines followed. So there's mechanical planters, mechanical harvesters, and mechanical processors. So this is an early steam-powered tractor. There's other things that happened during the Industrial Revolution too, such as you don't have to just put down like horse manure and cow manure on your fields. They've created synthetic fertilizers through chemistry. They've created pesticides, which can kill bugs, so there's not problems with like locusts and things like that. They've improved irrigation so that you don't have water after a heavy rain sitting in a field, killing, what you're trying to grow. And then they've begun to change how they're able to breed cows and horses, for that matter, too. And whether they're getting out of this is better livestock. Same thing with chickens and turkeys and everything else, geese. So this means that there's going to be more food being produced, and it's being produced by fewer people. And more food means more people. And this is going to change what farmland is used for. And so we begin the process of enclosure, which is the repossession and the fencing in by landowners of what are called the common lands used by the peasant farmers. So peasant farming is gone in England, and now they have a shift towards commercial farming. There's some reasons for the enclosure acts that happened from Parliament. And the first is it's economic, and farmers realized that they could earn more from growing cash crops than from renting the land to the peasants. So a field which maybe had 3-4 different farms that you rented out, you could knock down those farms, force those people off their land, and then you could grow a cash crop for more money. The consequences of the enclosure are that peasants were left with no land of their own to cultivate, and so small landowners, they could not afford to farm with expensive equipment, and so they were forced to sell. So there's a concentration of land into fewer and fewer hands. The large landowners, though, they were able to start to commercialize farm. So what happened to all these people? Well, some of the peasants, they stayed on and they worked as paid workers. Others, they started manufacturing in their homes, and then some became unemployed, and then they were forced to migrate to urban areas to work in factories. And some had to come to America. And the moral and the legal effects of the revolution in agriculture are making a profit became more important than holding on to tradition. So some ways of life were definitely lost. And then commercial farming appeared, and a legal system developed that supported the industrial capitalism. And capitalism is an economic system that's based on self-interest, privately owned resources, and markets. Now, there are good things about capitalism, and there are also bad things. One of the good things is you have more opportunities, more goods, people's standard of living goes up. The bad thing is you have inequality, and you have a concentration of both power and wealth into the hands of a few people. So capitalism and democracy don't necessarily mix that well. All right, the financing industry. So without capitalism, there might not have been an industrial revolution. And why would that be? Well, it takes money to make money. And so the industrial revolution probably would not have been able to happen when it did if it wasn't for capitalism. And remember, capitalism it comes out of Britain's ability to extend its influence and its direct conquest of overseas territories. So Canada, South Africa, India, Egypt, Australia, places like that. And so that meant that money was available in England to pay for like the steel and the coal and the building of the factories inside England. So now these wealthy capitalists, they invest in factories and they invest in the machines because of the potential profit that can be made from these, and their money is that they spend helps boost industrialism. The more money that was had, the more money that you could invest. So, like it says, money makes money. So banks encouraged investment in capital resources in in a physical form by buildings and things like that. And then the banking system, it helped by providing money to invest in and steering investors to industries. So it found people with money. It found the people that were looking for money. So it's like an early form of Shark Tank. So this is going to mean that we're going to create big business, and these are businesses that earn bigger and bigger shares of profit, and they would buy up small companies, and this led to monopolies. And a monopoly is where an industry is under the complete control, and that's production, supply of any good. And so in the United States, you see the growth of Standard Oil, and there's Parisian Gas Company. So if you in or ninth grade you had U.S. history, and they should have talked to you about Standard Oil Company and also like that's JP, that's Rockefeller. But there's also like Carnegie with Carnegie Steel. These monopolies are naturally produced. They're a natural occurrence for capitalism, and it's only because democracy expands during the same time that these monopolies begin to become regulated, and they're no longer uh, legal at the size and scale that they had been anyways. So big businesses, they were able to meet the growing demand for for many products using new production methods. So you've got mass production, you've got the assembly line, you've got interchangeable parts. They have the money to pay for these things, and then they provide new products. So we're going to see sewing machines that are invented, typewriters, telephones, radios, etc. So this is John Green. This is Crash Course. This is the Industrial Revolution. I'd like you to watch this. I'm not going to watch it with you though. Then this is the consequences of industrialization. It may not work for you. And that's where we're at with that.